Oh, Sony, you were doing so good. You were doing so good. But you had to ruin it. You had to ruin it. Okay. So today I woke up, went on Twitter. Twitter this morning was I was going. There's a lot of emotions going on Twitter this morning, and I was like, oh boy. And then this Sony article came in too, where I'm just like, oh man, I'm already messed up. Now I got to read this. So Sony's obsession with blockbusters is stirring unrest within PlayStation Empire. A small team had big ambitions for a Last of Us remake, but Sony handed the work to star studio Naughty Dog. There's a lot of things in this art. There's a lot of things in that headline that I gotta bring up. But the one thing I'm gonna bring up really quick, because it's not my main point in this, is why are they remaking Last of Us? Do you guys not realize the game's not 10 years old yet? It's not that old enough to warrant a remake. And the original still holds up very well. Like if you play the PS4 version of Last of Us Remastered, it still plays really good. Like I think now I think the 5 got more updates and now I can like play it 4K 60 or something like that. So you can play it at a really good resolution, you can play it at a great frame rate, and like it still holds up. Like they make it seem like Last of Us came out on the PS2. And it's just something really odd about remaking games when they're not even like that long. It's like, Sony, are you in that much of a dry spell for first parties or for IPs to remake? Listen, Naughty Dog has this Jack and Daxter series. The last Jack game was like what, 2003, 2004. Not like a Jack remake. There's a lot of other remakes I'd like, but no, let's remake Last of Us. And don't get me wrong, I love the Last of Us series, but this is a waste of money and a waste of time. But getting kind of more back to this article, that's all I have to say on that Last of Us one. Just like, doesn't need to happen. I hope it doesn't. If it does actually happen, I'm not gonna be too happy with that one. Getting back to this kind of article and the main point I kind of want to focus on with this. Is mostly getting on with Sony's restructuring of their studios and how they're kind of restructuring everything of their whole outlook of how they release games. Getting into the smaller things with the article, it mentions how Studio Bend, the studio that worked on Days Gone, they wanted to get Days Gone 2, but Sony denied that. Even though the game was profitable, the game did make its money back, but they kind of went off it more of saying, well, it wasn't critically successful, so let's not go through with that. We want you guys to work on this Last of Us remake, which they refused. Now I think they're working on their own like brand new IP, which, you know what? I love that. We'll work on new stuff. I'm always loving new IPs and just new things. So I'm fine with that. But the real big issue I kind of have, and the news that kind of reading this article, you get this really grim sense with Sony, is that they're really pushing everything away that they've set up from the past like 26 years. So now they're kind of going on this conquest of, let's only work on the big blockbuster games, and that's all we'll really release on our end from the Sony side. And from the publishing side as well too. Which I think is a really bad decision. Especially that kind of going into this outlook of, oh, we only want to go for these games because they're going to be profitable. These games from Japan, they might not be. So let's not go with them or even give them either the funding or publish them for a Western release. Which it's really ridiculous. Especially when you see the games that Sony has published over the years. Like going back to PS2, like and PS1, Parappa the Rapper, Dark Cloud, one of my all-time favorite games. Little Big Planet, great game. Also a great studio, but Sony's screwing them too. Because Media Molecule released Dreams last year, and Sony gave them no advertising. They just released the game with nothing and a small whimper. And it's a fantastic game that's getting overlooked because Sony spent no time on it. They were like, well, there's probably more bigger games coming out. We have Last of Us Part 2. We just had Final Fantasy 7 Remake. And now we have Ghost of Tsushima after. So why spend time giving advertising for dreams. Was like, give equal footing there. Like, that's what I loved about PS1, PS2, and even PS3, and a little bit into the 4. So, like, guess, like, pretty much most of the PS generation was that you had that good balance. Like, you'd have a game like Toomba that's not going to be, like, the huge, like, big game. But then you have it next to a game like Metal Gear Solid. Or you have it next to, like, a Jak and Daxter. And you go to PS2, it's like, well, you know, Jak and Daxter is not going to compete against Okage Shadow King. But they're two different games for two different markets. And while one isn't going for the market of being like the huge big blockbuster, it still does have that market. And it looks good for people too, that it shows, okay, they're still going to release these like for a wide variety of things. And for people who want to play these games. And that's what I loved about that. So now kind of seeing Sony go back on it and kind of go more towards a direction of getting rid of that undoes a lot of things over the past 26 years or so. Especially the news that Japan Studio is getting reorganized. That's the one that crushed me there. So that's getting restructured, and I don't know what they're doing now. Like, this is the one that really hurt, because Japan Studios has been with Sony since the beginning. And when you see the games they've worked on, you really start to question, it's like, what is Sony really doing? Like, okay, Gravity Rush, Knack 2, Last Guardian, Demon Souls, Shadow of the Colossus, Astrobot Rescue Mission. This is arguably one of the best VR games of all time. Across any VR headset, Astrobot is still, to me, one of the best ones. Astro's Playroom. This game just came out, and from what I've heard from everybody, that is probably one of the best PS5 games out right now. Just in how it utilizes the controller and the new features of the system, they say it's a really fun game. Legend of Dragoon, Ape Escape, like, the list goes on. Eco, like, there's so many games that Japan Studio has done over the years. And for Sony to be like, now, after they released a system seller, to be like, we're restructuring you now. I don't really know what to say. It's really, I don't know what Sony's doing. Like, they're really messing up. And it really, it comes down to the new person in charge of PlayStation, Jim Ryan. This dude is whack. Jim Ryan is whack. This is the same guy who a few years ago was saying, they asked him about like PS1 games and like bringing older games to the PlayStation systems, and he was like, there's no reason to do that. No one's really checking for those games. They're all old, and it's best to just move on to the new stuff. It's like, how are you gonna diss the past of like PlayStation when that's when some of the greatest games of all time were made on those older ones? Like, it's so backwards. It's like everything is switched now. It's like now Sony's gotten into this really high ego spot where like now Microsoft is coming in with so much love for their history and their past, where the Xbox Series X plays original Xbox games. It plays 360. It plays Xbox One. And it plays the new ones. Like, I love that. Even Nintendo. Like, say what you will about Nintendo Online, but at least they acknowledge their past. Sony just wants you to forget those old games exist. Like, don't even think about PS3. Fuck the PS3. Especially with all this garbage of them cutting off the PS3 store, where like over 2,000 games are going to be lost to time. I'm just like, Sony's on such a bad track record right now. And it's such a shame too, because the era of Sony from like 2013 to I'd say 2017-18 were the renaissance, where Sony was finally coming back, because they had a really rough period with 2006 and up after PS3 and just the whole experience in that system. It took them a long time to recover. And that 2013 E3 was really when they started to come back swinging. And there's a moment from that E3 conference that it always sticks out to me, and it's something I always think about, and what I loved about Sony at that time. I remember talking with some people about that conference and just what I loved compared to Microsoft at that time too, was this moment. So this was during the E3 2013 presser, and they had a lot of indie games on stage. They had all the indie developers that they were working on at the time showcasing their game on the stage, and they had this cool presentation where like they kind of panned, and it would show like one game, then it would show the other one, and it would show this and that. And I just loved this because at Microsoft's conference, you really didn't get that sense of like the indie games and that they were supporting that community. And I loved how much Sony was giving. Like, even though there were people who really cared for like the big AAA games, they still wanted to say, hey, we respect the smaller games, and at PlayStation, we're always going to be home for these studios and these things. And looking at these games here, like Octodad, that was a big game. Don't Starve, huge game. Outlast, huge. It's like, it was a great thing. And the person who took charge, this was Jack Tridden. The person who came in after the fact from this was Sony. And a person I'm missing dearly right now, man, Sean Layden. This dude next to Kaz Hirai is probably my favorite person when it came to Sony as an executive, because this dude knew his stuff, and like, I don't know, this guy's direction. This is kind of like when Phil Spencer took over at Xbox. That's who like Sean Layden was for PlayStation. Someone who really knew the stuff. They worked with the games, and they cared about the past of what the company did. Like, I had so much respect when Phil Spencer was, when they did the Xbox backwards compatibility thing for Xbox One. They were going back with the original Xbox, and he was bringing up like, the first game I did was, I think it was like Blinks the Cat or something. He's like, I loved this game, and I wanted to make sure that this game was doing this and that. Like, I had so much respect just that he did that. And there's a moment during E3 a few years ago where Sean Layden had this great speech. And I want to play the whole thing right now. Like, this speech is great. Hold on.
Earlier, I was delighted to hear Andy give a shout out to one of the most iconic games of our time, Vib Ribbon.
Vib Ribbon.
Yeah, give it up for Vib Ribbon.
Classic game.
A personal favorite of mine that really embodies the PlayStation spirit. It wasn't a multi-million seller, but that's not the point. Vib Ribbon was unafraid to go against the tide. It was courageous in its ambition, and it brought a completely new experience to gamers. It's an incredible time to be part of the PlayStation family. I look forward to growing our gaming community through breakthrough experiences that inspire and delight. After all, guys, it's all about the games, isn't it?
Perfect speech. It wasn't $1 million seller, but that wasn't the point. It was a unique experience. Like, that to me was what I loved about PlayStation, was that you got so many unique experiences from their games. Like I mentioned earlier, you have your big hits, you have your Metal Gear Solids, and then you have your obscure RPGs, you have your obscure puzzle games, platformers, this and that. So to me, when I read the article and just kind of seeing what Sony's kind of looking at now in their future, it's pretty grim, honestly. That's really what I took away from the article. I always like to have some kind of hope that, things don't get like that. But it's definitely concerning. Just some of the things Jim Ryan has said in the past about the past of PlayStation, and kind of seeing all these studio getting switched around. Like, there's definitely, Sony's in a weird spot. And it's like, come on, Sony. Like, you can do better than that. you can do better than that. So, I don't know. There's probably not much else to say. I could probably go on a bit longer. I could probably go way more. into this article and all that. But I really just wanted to go into more the fact of just why Sony is making a huge mistake doing this. Like, I feel like it's not going to really help them in the end. Like, if there's like a crazy game that's on like the Japan side, and it's like, that game's going to look dope. And then it's like, oh, it's not coming to the West because it might only sell 2 million copies. That might not be worth it. It's like, hey, the thing is, you never can tell with a game. Because you look at the Yakuza series. The Yakuza series for a long time, you know, a lot of the games did make it to the West. But they generally were decent sellers. But you look at the later Yakuza games, once they started getting like more and more love, the Yakuza series is huge out here in the West. It is massive out here. And it's because like they still took a chance on Yakuza out here. And you never know what that game's going to be. So it's like sometimes you have to play that gamble. So I don't know. But yeah, I'll end it for the rant this time. I don't do these very often, but today I had to, because after writing my thing on Twitter, I'm like, nah, I can't say everything I need to say on this conversation in 300 characters. Because if I try to give everything I had to say right now on Twitter, it'd be like an 85 tweet thread. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed hearing me rant, hearing my perspective on it. I'm sure you have your say on this conversation. Is Sony in the right in this? Is it the smart move to go for the blockbusters? Are you with me? Do you think Sony's smoking something? Are you excited for Last of Us Remake? Are you not? Let me know in the comments. Or you know what? Don't let me know. You know what? You do what you want to do. I'm not controlling you in any way. I'm going to leave that to you. But you know what? You take care out there. And I'll see you next time on the next rant, which hopefully it's not Sony, because it's been 2 rants in a row about PlayStation things. I want to start talking about some other companies. Come on, Nintendo.